Welcome back to Cellular Wisdom, the show where we explore all things health and wellness from the perspective of two people who are pretty sure we've discovered the secrets of the universe, only to realize we wrote them on a sticky note we've since misplaced. I'm Ethan Foster, your resident under-the-radar humorist. My specialty is pointing out the little quirks of human nature with the subtlety of a turtle crossing a busy freeway.
And I'm Alara Skye, your fearless comedic navigator who's equally comfortable cracking jokes and cracking open biology textbooks. Together, we're here to talk about some of the mind-blowing, life-changing, cell-nourishing ideas swirling around the health world, particularly those sparked by Dr. Mercola's research and insights.
Today's episode is titled Dr. Mercola's Cellular Wisdom. I like that it sounds important enough to belong in a textbook, but also friendly enough that you might ask it over for a potluck.
Indeed. Everyone's invited to the potluck, except those who argue that children don't need sleep. They can stay out in the hallway until they realize that's nonsense. Speaking of children's sleep, that's exactly what we're diving into. The subtle yet profound link between consistent bedtimes, better behavior, emotional control, and a whole host of other benefits.
Yes, absolutely. The big headline is that children who go to bed at the same time every night tend to be more, shall we say, pleasant the next day.
Which translates to fewer meltdowns, calmer dinners, and parents who get to finish their coffee while it's still warm. Talk about a modern-day miracle.
Precisely. For all the parents out there wondering why your child might be half gremlin, half angel, we have news. It might be the bedtime. Turns out that monstrous meltdown at 3 p.m. might have more to do with the bedtime routine than with your child's innate personality.
Good news for parents. It means your child isn't aspiring to be a tiny supervillain. They might just need a more consistent sleep schedule. Let's talk about why sleep is so fundamental and how it isn't just about not being tired. There's a whole symphony going on in the brain, especially in those magical hours after we put our heads on the pillow.
Let's start with the basics. Sleep is not a time when the body simply powers down like a computer. It's more like an internal renovation crew gets busy behind the scenes.
Right. We've got NREM sleep, where the body basically whips out the vacuum cleaner and the spackle. Tissues get repaired, the immune system gets a reboot, bones and muscles get stronger. My favorite part is imagining little cellular construction workers wearing tiny hard hats, hammering away on bone tissue.
Meanwhile, REM sleep is the part you may associate with dreamland. Brain activity spikes. Your eyes dart around like they're reading a suspense novel, and crucial processes related to learning and memory go on. When you're in REM, it's like your brain's organizing all the day's experiences into neat little mental file cabinets.
Precisely. For kids, that's especially important. Their brains are like sponges, soaking up everything from how to tie their shoes to how to interpret a new joke on the playground. If that REM sleep is cut short, it's like someone took your file folders and sprinkled them around the office. Suddenly, all that new knowledge is a bit disorganized.
Next thing you know, your child can't remember exactly why 2 + 2 = 4, or they're mixing up the name of their teacher with the dog's name. Probably not a good sign.
Another big piece is the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that says, hey, maybe throwing this toy truck at my sibling's head is not the best idea. If kids don't get enough sleep, that region becomes a little glitchy.
Which explains the facepalm moments for parents. Suddenly, the meltdown that might normally last 30 seconds becomes a full-blown 15-minute meltdown. About mismatched socks.
Or about the color of the cup. Not a life-altering detail, but the meltdown is epic. And then we blame ourselves, or assume the child is deeply rebellious. Turns out, it might just be the missing hours of sleep fueling that meltdown.
So, that's the overall backdrop. Let's get specific. There was a study published in November 2024 in the Journal of Developmental and Behavioral Pediatrics. Researchers followed 143 children. Average age was 6.7 years, if we want to be precise. And guess what they found?
It wasn't the total number of hours these kiddos slept. It wasn't even the minute-by-minute quality of their slumber that proved most important. Instead, it was the consistency of their bedtimes and their sleep midpoint. If bedtime varied wildly from one night to the next, the children exhibited more impulsive behavior and weaker emotional regulation.
In plain terms, an erratic sleep schedule translated to an erratic next day. The children were more prone to bursts of frustration, more likely to do something impulsive, like see if spaghetti sticks to the wall, and generally had a harder time navigating their emotions.
It's like the difference between planning a trip with a well-organized itinerary and waking up in a new country every morning without a map. You're disoriented, you make questionable decisions, and your mood might reflect that chaos.
The researchers also looked at different parenting approaches. One group had a responsive parenting program, focusing on structured routines, emotional support, and responding effectively to children's cues. The other group centered on home safety education. They found that the negative effects of inconsistent sleep schedules were less pronounced in the group receiving the responsive parenting guidance.
Meaning, if a parent is actively creating routine, structure, and emotional predictability at home, that child might have an easier time staying balanced, even if the bedtime drifts a bit. But if you've got neither routine nor a consistent bedtime, well, That's a perfect recipe for Meltdown City.
The meltdown capital of the universe, indeed. Also, interestingly enough, the study found that consistent bedtime routines in early childhood contributed to healthier body mass index as the kids grew older. So, consistent bedtimes can set the stage for a healthy weight too.
It makes sense when you think about it. Irregular sleep patterns can disrupt the body's circadian rhythm, leading to hormonal imbalances. Hormones like ghrelin and leptin get thrown off, so you end up with a child who might crave more sugary or starchy foods and not feel full at the right time.
Summation: consistent bedtimes mean calmer kids, improved emotional regulation, fewer impulsive decisions, and possibly a better handle on weight in the long run. As a parent, this might be your free pass to skip chaos and get a measure of peace, or at least reduce the number of coffee refills needed to survive the day.
Now, let's talk about practical tips for establishing that rock-steady bedtime. Because it's one thing to say, have your child asleep by 8 every night, and it's another to do it when bedtime battles are real.
Tip number 1, create a restful sleep environment. In other words, transform the bedroom into a calm oasis. Keep the temperature cool in that 60 to 68 degree Fahrenheit range. That helps the body slip into dreamland more easily.
Dim the lights, get rid of harsh overhead bulbs in the last hour. Maybe read a bedtime story under softer lighting. This signals the body to start producing melatonin. And definitely avoid letting them watch alien invasion movies 5 minutes before tuck-in.
Yes, or any high-energy cartoon that sets them bouncing off the walls. Next tip, limit exposure to blue light before bedtime. Screens, whether it's a tablet, phone, or the TV, shoot out blue wavelengths that suppress melatonin. Telling your child to go to sleep after letting them play an iPad game for the last hour is like telling yourself to calm down immediately after an intense cardio workout. Not so easy?
Precisely. And it doesn't matter if they claim it's relaxing. That blue glow is like an alarm clock for the brain. I recommend reading an old-fashioned paper book or telling stories. If you need to dim the overhead light, go for that cozy lamp effect. Let the body do its natural meltdown from day to night.
Another strategy? Manage stress before bedtime. It's tough to sleep if your child is worried about the monster under the bed, or if they're reeling from a sibling argument. Some parents have found success with simple relaxation techniques like deep breathing or mindful stretches.
Right? Or a short guided visualization. You can ask them to imagine they're floating on a fluffy cloud or that they're a warm cookie in the oven. Anything that helps them shift from high energy to calm reflection. It's amazing how a little guided focus can help them settle.
Indeed. Also consider removing electromagnetic fields by unplugging electronics in the bedroom. Some people even turn off the Wi-Fi at night. If your child is extremely sensitive, that might help them sleep more deeply. After all, the brain is a sensitive organ, and some data suggests EMFs can interfere with melatonin production.
Right. And if you're feeling especially adventurous, you can flip the circuit breaker. Although I recommend telling your housemates first so they're not left rummaging around in the dark, wondering who forgot to pay the electric bill.
Let's not forget about physical activity. Encourage regular playtime during the day so they're naturally tired at night. But you don't want them playing tag an hour before bedtime. That would be like drinking a triple espresso and then attempting yoga meditation immediately afterward.
Exactly. Try to ensure that the big, sweaty, heart-pumping activities happen earlier. Let's say at least a good 3 hours before bedtime. That way, cortisol levels have time to settle down. Otherwise, you're going to face a child bouncing off the walls when you're trying to say, lights out.
Another common struggle is bedtime resistance. Some kids will negotiate like they're top-level attorneys. 5 more minutes, please. I just need a drink of water. I have to feed my imaginary pet frog. It goes on and on.
The key there is consistent boundaries. Bedtime is bedtime might need to be your tagline. Offer them a structured wind-down routine so they know what to expect. A bath, pajamas, a story, maybe a lullaby, then lights out. If they anticipate each step, they're less likely to fight it.
And if they do fight it, keep calm, keep consistent. No yelling. Negative energy just ratchets up the stress level for everyone. Sometimes a sticker chart or praise can encourage them if they go to bed on time. They wake up proud of their achievement.
Little celebratory high fives in the morning can go a long way. Everyone likes to feel recognized for a job well done. And yes, going to bed at a reasonable time is a job well done for a child.
While we're on stress management, let's also bring up emotional freedom techniques, or EFT. It's a form of psychological acupressure, light tapping on specific meridian points, that's been known to calm anxiety and help with relaxation.
Imagine tapping gently on points along your child's face or upper body, combined with affirmations like, even though I'm worried about the dark, I'm still a brave kid. Or something of that sort. It can help them release tension. If it sounds a bit unusual, well, sometimes unusual ideas are the most helpful.
Exactly. The point is to reduce that pre-sleep stress load so that bedtime becomes a calm, even enjoyable experience, rather than a nightly battle.
Let's circle back to that interesting concept of social jet lag. This is when you have one sleep schedule on weekdays and a radically different schedule on weekends. Kids stay up late on Friday, catch up on Saturday morning, or vice versa. That shift can really scramble the internal clock.
Yes, because your body doesn't get the memo that it's Saturday. It's like, wait, I'm used to going to bed at 8 p.m., but now it's 10:30 p.m., and there's a movie on. The circadian rhythm gets confused, which might throw the entire next week off balance.
That's why experts often say to keep the weekend bedtime within an hour of the weekday bedtime. Consistency is key. I realize this might mean fewer late-night Netflix binges for parents, but if you want that meltdown-free Monday, it's worth the minor sacrifice.
So far, we've established that children function best when they get a certain number of hours of consistent sleep, somewhere around 9 to 12 for school-age kids, a bit more for preschoolers, and a bit less for teens, but not too little. They still need about 8 to 10.
Right. Teens might act like they only need 5 hours, but their biology begs to differ. If they're in that growth phase, they need the extra rest. Although try telling them that when they have homework and 1,000 text messages.
That's where boundaries around device usage at night come into play. People forget that melatonin's arch nemesis is the smartphone screen. That bright light is more effective at boosting alertness than a marching band in the hallway.
No wonder we see so many bleary-eyed teenagers in first period. They're up half the night scrolling, then wonder why that math test seems like it's in another language.
Let's highlight something for parents who might have younger children, the meltdown. When kids get too little sleep, they'll often skip right past the low battery stage into emotional outburst mode. It's as if their prefrontal cortex is on break and the rest of the brain is panicking.
Exactly. Then they might become easily defiant, or they might cry at the drop of a hat. You ask them to brush their teeth, and they react like you've taken away their favorite toy for eternity. In reality, they're just exhausted and can't cope.
Parents, if you find yourself in a constant state of exasperation, it might be worth evaluating that bedtime. Are you letting them stay up late, or is the bedtime shifting too often? Even a half-hour difference from one night to the next can add up over the week.
Sometimes it's also noise or temperature or a disruptive environment that's messing with their sleep. If they share a room with a sibling who's got a different bedtime, or if your house is near a busy street, some extra steps might be needed, like white noise machines or blackout curtains.
Let's pivot to the emotional regulation piece a bit more. When kids get enough rest, they're better at identifying and expressing feelings in a constructive way. Instead of lashing out, they might say, "I'm upset because you took my coloring book." That's quite the difference from a meltdown where they can't articulate a single rational sentence.
Right. It's also about teaching them that bedtime isn't punishment. Sometimes children resist because they think they're missing out on something. If bedtime can be framed as a cozy, nurturing, calm process, they might embrace it rather than fight it.
Some kids love the routine of a bedtime story, or a little chat about their day. It makes bedtime something to look forward to, rather than that dreaded moment the fun stops.
Exactly. And for parents who worry that a strict bedtime is too rigid, consider this. Kids thrive on routines. It gives them a sense of safety and predictability. That structure is beneficial mentally, emotionally, and physically.
Another interesting point from Dr. Mercola's analysis is that consistent sleep fosters the body's self-healing mechanisms. When kids sleep soundly, it's not just the brain that's getting a reset. The immune system is getting a tune-up, tissues are being repaired. It's basically a nighttime spa session for their entire body.
So if your child is prone to catching every cold in the school, maybe look at their sleep routine. Are they staying up too late watching the latest cartoon or playing that last video game? Those might be small changes that pay off big dividends in immune resilience.
Indeed. People often overlook the simple act of turning off the tablet in favor of an earlier bedtime, yet it might be the difference between constant sniffles and a healthier, more robust child.
Let's recap the big takeaway. The best approach is to develop a consistent bedtime routine, create a sleep-friendly environment, limit blue light, manage stress through relaxation techniques, encourage daily exercise at appropriate times, and address bedtime resistance with clear boundaries.
When you do that, you'll likely see improvements not only in your child's emotional regulation and behavior, but also potentially in their academic performance, their immune system, and their overall well-being.
And as you mentioned, many parents have reported that the entire household runs more smoothly once the child's sleep becomes more regular. The morning scramble becomes less of a frantic race, and you might actually get out the door without forgetting your keys.
Wouldn't that be nice? Also, as Dr. Mercola's piece suggests, the effect on weight management can be significant too. It might be one of those rarely discussed but critical factors in preventing childhood obesity. Just ensuring a child's circadian rhythm is stable.
Routines for the win, and it's free. You don't need a fancy subscription to get your child into bed at a certain time. You just need consistency, a little patience, and maybe a comfy pair of pajamas.
Now, let's dive into another angle. A lot of us as adults are also guilty of ignoring our sleep. We binge watch, we stay up working, and then wonder why we're grumpy the next day. Seeing these child-based studies is interesting because it suggests that maybe we're not so different from them.
Indeed, just taller versions. If consistent bedtimes are crucial for a 6-year-old's emotional regulation, guess what? The same principle probably applies to a 36-year-old. So if you're modeling poor sleep habits, children might be picking up on that.
Parenting is all about setting an example. If you're drifting to bed at 1 a.m. after scrolling your phone, your child might be learning that's normal. Then you wonder why they're begging for the tablet at 10 p.m. to watch just one more show.
Exactly. As you build consistent routines for your child, maybe build them for yourself as well. That might be an added benefit. A calmer household all around.
So, if you're a parent or caretaker, maybe tonight is the night to try an earlier, more consistent bedtime. Start the wind-down routine 15 minutes earlier than usual. Talk with your child about what bedtime means to them, how it helps them stay strong and balanced.
Turn down the lights, power off devices, or at least keep them out of the bedroom. Bring in a bedtime story or let them pick a book. Relax. Practice slow, deep breathing with them if they're feeling restless. Consistency is your best friend here.
And if bedtime gets off track one night, don't lose hope. Just gently bring it back on track the next day. This is a process, not a one-and-done fix.
Yes, children's sleep habits can be finicky, especially if you're used to a more chaotic schedule. It might take a couple of weeks to see real changes. But once the new routine is established, you'll likely wonder how you survived any other way.
At this point, let's step into the bigger picture. Consistent bedtime is kind of like the first domino. You knock that one over, and a chain reaction of beneficial outcomes follows. Better emotional regulation, better mental clarity, improved immunity, healthier weight, fewer conflicts.
Not to mention more harmony in the household. If you're not wading through tantrums and impulsive outbursts, you have more time for positive experiences, reading together, playing a board game, or simply having an actual conversation without meltdown interruptions.
Absolutely, and for the kids, they get to function at their best, whether it's learning new math concepts, developing social skills, or exploring creative hobbies.
Everyone wins. And that's quite a payoff for something as simple as go to bed at 8 p.m. every night.
Let's also acknowledge that bedtime isn't the only factor. Diet, exercise, emotional support, all these things matter. But bedtime is often overlooked or underestimated. People think, oh, as long as they're asleep by a certain time, it's fine. Meanwhile, one night it's 7:30, the next it's 9, the next it's 8:15, and so on. That variability can add up.
It's worth paying attention to the midpoint of the child's sleep, too. The research found that if the midpoint of sleep is shifting drastically, say your child goes down at 8 p.m. one night and 10 p.m. another, that midpoint is going to vary quite a bit, and that correlated with impulsivity in the study.
Right. If bedtime moves around by an hour or so, that midpoint shifts too, and apparently that's not so great for the brain. It's like telling the circadian rhythm to guess what time it is. That might lead to a grouchy child who can't concentrate in class and picks fights in the lunch line.
Let's also note that some families might have unusual schedules due to work or other constraints. If that's the case, do your best with the schedule you have. The biggest takeaway is consistency. If bedtime happens at 9 p.m. because of your family's schedule, stick to 9 p.m. if possible.
The final piece of advice from Dr. Mercola's analysis was about teaching kids to recognize their own cues. Whether it's cues for hunger or tiredness, letting them learn to listen to their bodies fosters independence.
Right. If they know I'm yawning, I'm rubbing my eyes, they start to realize bedtime is near. They don't rely solely on you announcing it. They sense it themselves. Over time, that fosters healthier habits into adulthood.
A self-aware child who knows to say, I'm tired, I need to rest, is a gift to everyone. It reduces the guesswork, the negotiations, the drawn-out tantrums. They might still ask for one more story, but at least they'll recognize the signals.
And that's a big part of parenting, right? We want to raise kids who can handle their own well-being someday. Start them young with the idea that sleep is crucial, not just something grown-ups force upon them so they can watch TV in peace.
Let's think about the big picture ramifications. If children are better rested, they might have better academic outcomes, better emotional health, fewer risk behaviors as they age. Sleep is foundational. We've seen how adult sleep issues can correlate with all sorts of chronic problems. Why not give kids a head start in this department?
Exactly. And hopefully, you cut back on trips to the principal's office or visits to the nurse, because the child's immune system and emotional control are more robust.
Nobody ever said, I really regret that consistent bedtime. Usually the regrets come from ignoring the problem.
Before we wrap, let's underscore the main advice. Keep bedtime consistent. Aim for enough total hours. Ensure the environment is conducive to good sleep. Reduce screen time before bed. Incorporate calming bedtime rituals. And address stress or anxieties that might be keeping your child awake.
And if you do find yourself in meltdown territory, consider that it might be a sleep issue rather than a purely disciplinary one. Addressing it from that angle might save you a lot of frustration.
Indeed. Any final thoughts, Ethan?
Only that I might adopt this same routine for myself. I've discovered that I too get grumpy if I don't go to bed at a consistent hour. Who knew?
Right? Adult meltdown is just as real, but we hide it with coffee and forced smiles. Let's practice what we preach and go to bed on time, folks.
That's it for today's edition of Cellular Wisdom. We've learned that bedtime can be a superpower. If you want calmer kids, sharper minds, better moods, and maybe fewer visits to the ice cream tub for comfort, start with the simple act of tucking in your child at the same time every night.
Thank you for joining us. We'll be back with more talk on natural health, longevity, and maybe a dash of comedic brilliance. Emphasis on maybe. For now, set those bedtimes, tuck those kiddos in, and watch the difference unfold.
You've been listening to Dr. Mercola's Cellular Wisdom, courtesy of Ethan Foster and Alara Sky. Consistency is your friend, so we'll see you at the same time next time.
Good night, everyone, or good day, depending on your time zone. Just make sure your bedtime remains locked and loaded. Sleep well, stay sharp, and we'll catch you on our next episode.
Take care, folks.
And remember, the path to brighter days might just start under the covers.